Hey everyone, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate 5 demo for the piece I call The Grinch. So yeah, I drew The Grinch this year for Christmas, or I should say last year for Christmas, 2020, and The Grinch has been drawn a million different ways, but I had this idea for how I might tackle him that I thought could be interesting. And for the last bunch of years, I have been doing this sort of Christmas lineup. It originally just started with this illustration here of Santa, which admittedly was a very different take on Santa than what I would normally draw. If somebody said draw Santa, I would probably draw something a little bit more traditional, but when I sat down to draw this, I said, let's do something a little different. And then for the following year, I decided to tackle Mrs. Claus and keep in the same vein as the first one and just try to do something a little bit different, but keep the overall theming, this sort of like pseudo watercolor with the white frame around it, with the blue foggy background. This led me to say, well, I got two, let's go ahead and keep going. And for the following year, I did the Elves. I did Santa's Elves, which this one I was particularly happy with. I just liked the interaction with all of them, and having them kind of in this piled tower I just thought was really fun. And then in 2019, I did the Krampus, because I didn't want to do reindeer. I really just didn't want to draw reindeer. And I was trying to think of other things that I could maybe fold into this, my version of this like Christmas mythology. And so I made this kind of nice version of the Krampus. Now, when I decided that I was going to do the Grinch, I was trying to think of all the different ways that he has been depicted, and they've all pretty much stayed in the same general pocket. And since I was doing another person who was going to be furry like the Krampus, I didn't want to repeat the same shape language that I used there. So I had to come up with something that I thought was going to be interesting and kind of take the Grinch into a unique place. By the way, all of those other Christmas pieces that I've done are all on this channel as well, so if you'd like to hear a bigger breakdown on the thought process behind them and the methods, that'll be in those videos. I'll link them down below. The problem with doing a series is a series of images, or even like just anything that you're trying to keep consistent, is you're trying to figure out what things stay and what things go, what things are elements of the series and what things are going to change from piece to piece so that you can also keep it fresh. You'll also notice here in his original posing I had him holding this like stack of presents, but I thought it was like fun but a really weird pose that like why is he doing that, so I eventually changed it to he's helping to decorate. So you'll see that change come in throughout the sketches here. But the thing that I want to say about the series is that maintaining that consistency can be a challenge. Maintaining the consistency versus the changes can be a challenge, but the thing that was really hard, or has always been hard, about this particular Christmas lineup is I only do one of these a year. So I'm always having to kind of excavate the previous pieces to figure out exactly what it was I did. Did I set the lines to blue, or are they black, or are they gray? What did I do for the background? What did I do for the color methodology? And what did I do for something like line weight so that they can all feel like they exist next to each other? And speaking of line weight, I think that the line weight in this one is a little thicker than all of the others, and I think that I also employ a little bit of extra line variation action in these lines, mostly because the original Santa one was supposed to look like a sort of like pseudo hipstery like greeting card kind of vibe with just this really simple thin pencil line, some very simplistic coloring, that type of thing. By the time I got to this Grinch, and I actually had to get this done really quickly because I wanted to get done for Christmas, and I've been very unproductive outside of work lately. I thought, okay, I'm going to just do this in a way that'll allow me to get it done a little bit quicker and will, for most people, feel like it's in the exact same vibe as the others. So I go with a slightly thicker pencil, which allows me to rely on the brush a bit more so that I don't have to do a lot of refinement of the lines. You can see here, as far as the design is concerned, I went with this extremely top-heavy design where he's got this really big head and this kind of slinky body. I actually really love thinking about how this version of the Grinch might move. I think that'd be really cool. Similarly to the Krampus, the idea with this version of the Grinch was that he was also like sort of post-realization that he was being bad kind of thing, right? It's similar to, or it's not similar to, the Krampus. My version of the Krampus is like sort of, he doesn't go through the same narrative arc that the Grinch goes through. He's just kind of like this avatar for how to deal with bad children kind of thing. But in my version, he's made friends with everybody. He's sick of not just having fun and doing the Christmas thing. And so similarly to the Grinch here. the Grinch here is like the chief decorator. He's like, I'm here to decorate, show me what to do. And then we've got this box of decorations here, which I definitely took some shortcuts on, that the candy canes are duplicated and flipped and rearranged, and the ornaments are also just duplicated circles. The garland is hand-drawn, and the lights, the cord is hand-drawn, but then the lights themselves are duplicated. In this case, especially because of the style of these illustrations, no reason to go any more hardcore than that. So now we're done with the line drawing, and I actually then brought this into a separate file that was previously the Krampus file. Duplicated the Krampus file, merge a bunch of stuff, get rid of a bunch of stuff, make sure that I'm kind of hitting the right colors, make sure that I'm hitting the right size for the Grinch, getting him sized properly. I like thinking that he would be the tallest of all of them, and so that is this take on the Grinch. I love this color green, especially against a bunch of the other colors that are in the piece. Now, I originally started painting this with, I believe, what's referred to as the Oriental brush in the Procreate settings, because I thought that's what I remembered using in the original, but to be totally honest, what I was going for in the originals was some of those mistakes, some of those happy accidents where you can kind of see through. And since the turpentine brush has served us so well here on this channel, the Oriental brush, I was like fighting with it constantly, so I was just like, okay, screw it. Again, I need to get this done. Christmas is coming. Let's get this picture done. So I switched to that brush. I think I've already switched to it at this point. I don't remember exactly, but point is that part of the flatting of this was done with some brushes, and then some brush, and then I switched to another brush. Overall, the rendering style for these pieces is incredibly simplistic. The point is to just keep them like clear and bright and simple, not overcomplicate things, and not make the piece about the rendering. It's really just about the character and the fun, and it's a Christmas thing, right? So with all of these, you get flats, and then you get a little bit of shadow where I need to separate things. And in some ways, this coloring method is very similar to the A Village Corrupted stuff, where the idea is to just get the flats in, let the lines do a lot of the talking, and then if there's something that needs some extra clarity or depth, or it would just be cool to have some extra depth, we go in and we throw a little bit of shadowing. So the line art is a light blue set to multiply, so the colors that we're putting underneath are going to affect the color of the lines. And so areas like the eyebrows and those lines that I put that are kind of like stylistic, almost like fur patterning, and then those whiskers coming off of his upper lip, those are all going to have to get extra support. So we go in and we actually paint in some color underneath there to support the eyebrows and everything else, so that those actually read dark and not just absorbing the color underneath. Now, about the design that I tried to, some things about the design that I tried to keep solid and Grinchy is, of course, the green. He's also always had these really prominent eyebrows. He also has almost always had this like kind of ring around his neck of like darker fur, so I wanted to keep that. And his shoes are too tight. They're not too tight to where he's still being some cranky asshole, but like that is something that I thought would be fun to keep in. So you've got these high tops, these chucks that he then has the fur kind of like going over the sides, like they are, like he just ties his shoes too tight. That's a quality the Grinch has. You can see I have this purple hat on him in the beginning. This was always a bad idea, but I don't know why I made it purple to begin with. Instead, I end up going with the sort of like Terry Bogard color scheme, which at first I thought was like just like a really strong, punchy, cool Christmas, but not Christmas that involves green, because he's already green kind of color scheme. I thought like, oh man, that was so cool that I came up with this. And then I was looking back at the old ones and I'm like, oh, I did this on all the old ones too. So I mean, sorry, I didn't think it was clever like I had invented it. I just meant like, oh, this really looks nice together. And then I realized that I was already doing it before, and it was actually stupid of me to not reference it from the get-go. Now, one thing that you'll notice that's a little bit of an extra kind of juicing in this piece that you don't get in some of the older ones. Again, this is the thing with like time has gone on and I wanted to do different things with it than exactly what I had intended originally. I've got this soft gradient on his back and on his hands and stuff of this darker green, which does get kind of adjusted and lightened a little bit as time goes on. But the point is that I just thought that really took him to the next level, and it made his fur, because the Grinch has always been like this weird creature that's just kind of like monochromatic from head to toe and doesn't have a lot of variation in his fur. And again, I know he was never created to be hyper realistic or anything like that, but I just thought it would be nice to add a little bit more variation in there. It could really jazz him up a bit. It's also really hard to do garland when you're dealing with this flat look and feel. I put a little bit of shine on things like the ornaments just to really sell those because I felt we had to sell that material a little bit, but it did kind of deviate from the look and feel just a little bit in order to do that. There's some shadows I was talking about right there on his like belly, under his arms, under his head, just to give a little bit of extra depth on it, adjust the opacity on those so that they look nice, and then that's like a good way to just get a little bit more well, just like depth and form on something that is otherwise just flat. We haven't actually gone in and put in any defining shadows. Lines, flats, and then some soft gradient-y type stuff just to separate some things. Then here at the end, we just kind of turn everything on that's from the original pieces. I normally don't do that. I usually like to recreate it, but again, I was in a hurry, and I think I did that on the Krampus as well, and so it just made sense to like keep the consistency, bring in all of the elements for the other ones, size them down at the very end just to get them a little bit more comfortable in the frame. And then there's our final shot of the Grinch. Something I didn't mention earlier is that I actually did a very, very light sketch of this in this exact sort of shape for him at like the middle of November, and I was like, that's maybe who I'll do for Christmas. And then I like hated it. And I deleted the file, and then I was like, okay, I don't know who I'm going to do for Christmas. And then once Christmas actually rolled around, I was like, I'm going to do the Grinch, and I'm going to try that shape again, and I wish I still had that file. But it wasn't like it was hours of work, but it was just funny that I abandoned it and then was like, oh, I'm coming back to it. One other quick note that I just wanted to make sure I mentioned is I really wanted to make his eyes a different color because I just thought that would make them stand out more, but he's almost always been depicted with green eyes. I think he was depicted with red eyes at one point too in like the original animated movie or something like that. I can't remember now, but I did the research at the time, and ultimately I decided that there were just too many iterations of him where he just had green eyes, so I went with the yellow eyes with the green irises, and in some ways that ends up making this character kind of like an amalgamation of all the different interpretations of the Grinch. So I hope you dug it. Hope you enjoyed seeing a illustration from Christmas at the end of January. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are places where you can find me.